For those of you who don't know me, my name is Byron. I am one of the ministers here at Gungahlin Anglican Church. And today we are continuing our series on the book of Joel. In the prelude to the confession, when Rhonda read Joel 2 verses 12 and 13, I thought, spoilers! Because we're not up to that bit yet. That's next week. This is week 3, and it hasn't been the easiest of journeys so far. In week 1, Joel was verses 1 to 12 of chapter 1, and Joel paints a picture of complete devastation, which results in desperation on behalf of everyone. There is no one not affected. As I said on the day, there is no silver lining in that section of the passage. It was deep and it was dark. The entire land is devastated as this swarm of locusts come through. Everything is gone. There's no food left. They can't worship anymore. The land will not produce the next crops either because it's been so devastated. Then last week, we finish off chapter 1 mourning, or rather lamenting. We mourn the losses. The people of Israel mourning the devastation, mourning the destruction of the land, mourning the fact that they can no longer worship the way they used to because of the destruction wrought by the locusts. But there is a hint of hope right at the end of that chapter. Yet to you, O Lord, will I look. But it's still not overly happy, is it? And then we move into the start of chapter 2, and honestly, it doesn't get much better yet. But I think it's an interesting opportunity to look at. One of the things I want to talk about today is perspective. Now, what gives us our perspective on things? What we believe and the choices we have made affect how we approach things through life. And I think in this passage today, there is an opportunity to take two positions. Starting at verse 1. Blow the trumpet in Zion, sound the alarm on my holy hill. Let all who live in the land tremble, for the day of the Lord is coming. At the end of chapter 1, after all of the despair and the mourning and the lamentation, we look to the Lord from the darkness. And now the Lord is coming. Yay! Right? A day of darkness and gloom. What? A day of clouds and blackness. Like a dawn spreading across the mountains, a large and mighty army comes, such as never was in ancient times, nor ever will be in ages to come. Like in chapter 1, the description of the locust plague was like something they had never seen before and would never see again. Here we get that image again. Never seen before, will never be seen again. This is the day of the Lord, the day of the Lord coming. Now, the day of the Lord is a great thing. You know, as Tim mentioned this morning, you can approach the day of the Lord a couple of ways. The day of the Lord can be moments in history where God has exercised judgment through action. Or it can be the final day of the Lord when he comes in glory to restore justice permanently. Yeah, and we like the pictures of it all being nice all of a sudden, but is it actually going to be quite like that? I want to duck across to Matthew for a moment and look at what Jesus says. Matthew 24. I'm going to read from... I'm going to start with verse 9. You'll be handed over to be persecuted and put to death. You'll be hated by all nations because of me. At that time, many will turn away and betray and hate each other. Skip ahead to verse 16. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. They're talking about the tribulation that is coming, that dark time. This is a chapter 1 of Joel moment here. This is, I think, part of what we pray when we pray the Lord's Prayer and said, save us from the time of trial. Because what does Jesus say? Let no one in the housetop go down to take anything out of the house. Let no one in the field go back to get their cloak. How dreadful it will be in those days for pregnant women and nursing mothers. Pray that your flight will not take place in winter or on the Sabbath. For there will be great distress, unequalled from the beginning of the world until now, and never to be equalled again. Joel 2 verse 2, right there. If those days had not been cut short, no one would survive, but for the sake of the elect, those days will be shortened. Then from verse 30, there will appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and all the peoples of the earth will mourn when they see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send his angels with a trumpet call, and they will gather the elect from the four winds, from one end of the heavens to another. Let all who live in the land tremble, for the day of the Lord is coming. It is close at hand. This is not the pretty picture that we hope for, but at the same time it is a moment of hope, because this is the day that is longed for, the day when the Lord comes in his might to restore justice permanently. But when that happens, I see the images of wars. It's like being in an occupied country that is in the process of being liberated by force. Everyone is affected. When war goes through a country, there is no one not touched. You look at the photos of France in World War II, after the Germans had come through one way and then the Allies had come through the other. There's nothing left. And yet when the Allies came through, that was restoration. That was hope. That was freedom restored. And yet, in the middle of that is a terrifying time. That is this Joel's description of the day of the Lord. That no matter what side you're on, it is a terrible time, because the irresistible force, the God who cannot be resisted, is coming through to restore his justice. Before them fire devours, behind them a flame blazes. Before them the land is like the Garden of Eden, behind them a desert waste. Nothing escapes them. When I was living in Portugal, Napoleon, back in the day, before my time there, I'm not that old, had been through a couple of times. And then Wellington, among others, helped them out a little bit. But how they did it was scorched earth. So they would march through and they would burn everything behind them, so that the enemy who was still left in that area had no food, no shelter, nothing. There is nowhere left to hide. Nowhere left to hide. And it is like that when the day of the Lord comes. With verse 7, they charge like warriors, they scale walls like soldiers. They plunge through defences without breaking ranks, they rush upon the city, they run along the wall, they climb into the houses like thieves, they enter through the windows. There is nowhere left to hide in the day of the Lord. Whether that be a present time day of the Lord, or the final day of the Lord when Jesus comes back in his authority to restore true justice, to bring about the new heavens and the new earth. Now, when you're in this kind of situation, there are two sides you can be on. Regardless of where you are, it is a horrible moment. War is not pleasant. Doesn't matter if you know you're on the winning side or not. It is not a pleasant environment. But you can either be in despair or still have hope. For those who are, as Jesus called them, the elect, as God's conquering army comes through, you know you are being liberated. You know you are being freed. So even though the process is painful, the process is difficult, the process is awkward, to use a milder word, you know that in the end, justice will be restored. Freedom will be restored. Now, how often does this happen in situations in our own lives where we all have those things that we struggle with? We all have those habitual sins, those habits, those areas of life where, if left to our own devices, we are not going to fix the problem ourselves. So we need external help. We need the Lord to come in. Now, just like if you have, say, a tumour that needs to be excised through surgery, surgery is an invasive process. It's not nice. The body gets cut. But in the painful process, health is restored. So it is for us when the day of the Lord comes for us. If it's, for example, allowing God to deal with a sin or a difficulty, the process itself may indeed be painful, but that process is required to restore hope, to restore justice, restore the life that should be. Now, we want the freedom, we want the victory at the end of the battle, but we don't want the battle. The picture that Joel paints here is, yes, the victorious day of the Lord is coming, and he is exercising that through his might and power, but it is not a pleasant process, and it can't be, because of what needs to be done. I don't want to give spoilers. Before then the earth shakes, the heavens tremble, the sun and moon are darkened, the stars no longer shine. The Lord thunders at the head of his army. His forces are beyond number, and mighty is the army that obeys his command. The day of the Lord is great, it is dreadful. Who can endure it? While that is, at surface value, a bleak statement, let's think about it. Who can endure it? Evil certainly can't, and that is a good thing. Sin can't endure the day of the Lord, and that is a good thing. Everything that is against the will of God cannot endure the day of the Lord. So even though we have a painful, difficult process, there is hope. Even though we know the process will not be pleasant, we know the outcome will be right and true and proper, because no one can resist the Lord. And yet we do resist, don't we? We know those things that aren't right in our own lives. We know those things that we've sworn we've dealt with, and no, I don't do that anymore, but we do, if we're honest. Or we think about them enough that it doesn't make a difference if we don't. The author of Hebrews touches on that. If we deliberately keep on sinning after we have received the knowledge of truth, no sacrifice is left, but only a fearful expectation of judgment and the raging fire that will consume the enemies of God. So one question we want to ask tonight is, so where do you stand in the day of the Lord? Are you still holding on to the things that you don't want to let go? The old life, as we call it. The habits, the sins. I can do it on my own. Or are you willing to surrender to God now, so that in the day of the Lord you will be among the elect? In the time of Joel, the people of Israel have a choice. They have faced a dark time. The deliverance from the dark time will be painful, but it will be right. And they have a choice to make, to look to God and to do the steps that are needed to bring that to pass. We today have a choice. We can look to God in the dark time. We can cry out to him. We can mourn and lament the things that are not as they should be, and give them over to the irresistible one. Or we can reject his offer of love. The Lord our God is irresistible. And when the day of the Lord comes, we will be on one side or the other. Joel is calling out to the people of Israel to choose their side, to choose the right side, to choose the side of the Lord. He's calling out to us today to do the same thing, to choose God. So where do you stand? Are you still resisting the God who comes? Or are you willing to give yourself to him and let him do what needs to be done to renew you, to remove all that is not as he intended, to give you new life through his Son? The process is not always easy because we like to hold on to those things. They are deeply ingrained in us. As Jesus himself said, there is no one good. And when the Lord excises those things that shouldn't be, it hurts. But it is for good. It is for good.